Hi there, Moz fans. This is Matt Roney from the Moz community team, and I am very pleased to be presenting my Moz colleague, Senior Community Manager Erica McGillivray. This is one of the very rare Mozinars in which we are both in the same room. She will be presenting Storytelling with Data. Stick around after the main presentation for Q&A. Please ask all your questions through the GoToWebinar questions interface or via Twitter using the hashtag Mozinar. That's hashtag MOZINAR. The webinar will be recorded, and the recording and deck in PDF form will be available later on, within 24 to 48 hours, at moz.com/webinars. You'll also be receiving an email with a link to the recording. You'll need to make sure to register for a free community account with Moz in order to watch those past webinars. If you have any questions or concerns about Mozinars in general, please contact us at community@moz.com. And with that, here's Erica.
Hey, Moz fans. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day. So, as Matt mentioned in my intro, today we're going to be digging into storytelling with data and exactly what that means for you. So, as this is a storytelling webinar, I'm going to start off with a story. This is my dad. Well, this is not actually my dad. This is Yosemite Sam. But like Yosemite Sam, my father is short. He has a somewhat short temper, and he also has a handlebar mustache, so he may have gotten called Yosemite Sam a few times in our family. My father and I disagree about many things, but one of the things we have disagreed on for a long time is global warming and man-made climate change. My father does not believe that global warming is real, and he's very insistent on this. And I am someone who is very into science and facts and data. And so our arguments often end in a standstill, with me spouting off things about, melting glaciers and polar bears, heartwarming things. And my father being like, nope, it's not real. I mean, he really couldn't have gotten a more frustrating daughter probably in me, because I'm basically the Lorax being like, the world, we got to care about our planet and love it. I was like on a news, I was on the local news when I was in 4th grade talking about, how to save the whales. So it's definitely been a bone of contention between me and my father throughout my life. And my father always comes back to this story about my childhood and his empirical evidence that global warming is not real, which is that my brother and I, pictured here, we made this loaf of bread and we ate it and we didn't die. You're like, okay, whatever. You guys went to a wheat field and you picked some wheat and you made some bread and you were little kids and grandma helped. So, the bread actually tasted okay at the end of the day. But what you don't see in this photo is that my father is an auto mechanic, and this is actually the back lot of his auto repair shop. We were actually living in a studio apartment above it at the time, and grandma was visiting, and we went out in this back lot where all these cars, he stored them, whether they were waiting for customers to pick up or like junkers, he was taking parts off, and there happened to be some wheat, so we picked it and made the bread. But cars, especially broken cars, they leak all sorts of things. Antifreeze, oil, not to mention this was the late 80s where the EPA didn't have as many regulations as they do now. And my father used to go out and just dump used antifreeze out in that back lot. So the wheat that we were harvesting was grown in a bunch of chemicals that were probably not very good for us. But, we didn't die when we made this bread. So thus, in my father's head, global warming is not real. So the problem with my father and I is that I kept bringing him all this data, but he believes in stories. He doesn't necessarily trust facts so much. It's the stories that really motivate him. It's the bread that we ate. So Edward Tufte famously said, if the statistics are boring, you've got the wrong numbers. I'd like to also add that you may also have the wrong story and you're telling it the wrong way. So when we actually look at stories and when we're using them for business, we need to really think about what stories are. Stories are really the blending of emotions with facts. We remember as people those emotional things. Professor Jennifer L. Aker did some studies on a bunch of different storytelling, and she found that the most important aspects of a story were that they were memorable, that they were impactful, and that they were personal. So what about these facts that we like to pull out and use all this data, right? I was obviously going to stick a Star Trek reference in here. So when you actually look at the science, we people are 12 times more likely to remember stories than facts. There was a study done at Harvard where a bunch of students were tasked to read short descriptions of different crimes, and then they were to do 1-minute presentations to their fellow students. And it was kind of put as a learn how to give presentations and talk to your fellow students. But what they were actually looking at was what the students talked about in those presentations and what the students who were listening remembered. So these are obviously stories about crime, so they're very fact-based. And when the students gave their presentations, that on average, they put 2.5 facts in all their 1-minute presentations. That's pretty good. There's a lot of facts. Like crime statistics can be really compelling, but only something like 10 out of the 65 students who did this actually put in a story. But when they went at the end, so everyone gave their presentations, and at the end they were asked to write down what they remembered from the presentations. And this 12 times fact, that's where this comes from. It's that they, even though only 10 of them put stories in them, those students remembered those stories 12 times more than all of those facts. So what is it about numbers that, we should be compelled by these facts? We should really want to dig in. Well, we people have a hard time remembering numbers. We got about to the number 5. We're really good at counting to 5, but once it gets a little bigger, it gets a little hazy. We have an okay grasp on what 100 is. So I took this picture, and it's 100 of my action figures because I wanted a good illustration, like what does 100 look like? And as I went to set this up, I was like, do I even have 100 action figures? And I started going through my house counting. Oh yeah, I have at least 200 action figures. It's kind of ridiculous, but I just couldn't grasp how many action figures were actually on my shelf. But what about when we look at even bigger numbers? Oftentimes in business, if we're working for a large company, we may be dealing in millions, thousands. What does it say when we look at our web traffic? And what's the difference between 2,000 hits and 1 million hits to your website? So when we look at the Milky Way, there are 300 billion stars in it. That's a phenomenal number. None of us can really wrap our brains around it. So what do scientists do when they talk about the Milky Way? They break it down. They say that there's 42 stars for each person on Earth. This makes it a little more relatable of a number. We kind of understand it a little more. We grasp it. We can wrap our head around that number, but it also creates a story. It creates this idea that, each of us might be able to name those 42 stars, or maybe visit them, or maybe own them someday if we're, adventuring out there. So the other thing when we're remembering about numbers and stories is always to make it personal. So most of us have someone who's your boss. It could be a client. It could be a lot of different structures if you're in an agency, but you probably have someone you report to. So Jen is my boss, and this is her in this photo with me at MozCon. And when I'm trying to persuade Jen to get on one of the projects I'm working on, or maybe understand some of the results I'm seeing, I know her very well, and I can really tailor stories to be personal for her. I know things like she loves LL Cool J, so can I work that into something?
She loves LL Cool J a lot. It's weird.
She does. She loves LL. I know that she loves tacos, Maybe I can relate something to tacos. I might know things about her that might be her blind spots to the story that I'm trying to weave. There might be something she doesn't care about, or there may be something she's already on board with. She's the head of our community team. I never have to sell her on the power of community if I'm doing a good project. All I have to say is like, it's going to make our community better. And she's like, all right, let's do it. So think about that as you're building stories. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the basics of story building and how you can really mold it around your data. So for those of you who've ever been in an English class or a creative writing class, you've probably seen this pyramid. It's called Freytag's pyramid. And basically, it describes the structure of every story. You start off with some exposition, you're getting to know who your characters are, the rising action, people are doing something. Let's take Lord of the Rings, for instance. You meet the hobbits. Then the rising action is their journey. You have some climaxes throughout, maybe they're fighting Sauron or Saruman. Okay, and then you have the falling action, which is the ending. They're getting rescued by the eagles. They're wrapping everything up. And then you have the denouncement. I think I said that correctly.
Denouement.
Ha. Matt knows his French better than me.
Probably not true.
The denouement. And this will be the end where, if we're using Lord of the Rings again, they're back at the Shire, they're hanging out. We find that Bill the Pony survived. This was very important to me when I was reading Lord of the Rings. It's the basics. So this is the very, very basics of a story and what most stories you can track to. So, think about some stories in your life. But you can apply this to business too when you're presenting stories and when you're trying to sell things to clients or sell programs to your boss. So the first thing you always want to consider is who's the hero of this story. And we're going to talk more about a time I really got in trouble when I misidentified the hero of the story. Who's going on this journey? Who is walking this program through all of its stages? What are the business hurdles? So you have to think outside yourself. So if you're like the SEO, you're like, my business hurdle is that I can't get any of the metadata correct on the site because the back end's all broken. This is very common. This is a very common SEO problem. But you know what? Your bosses, your CEO, your clients are thinking, oh my gosh, I got to meet my sales goals. That might be more important to them. It might be something else. It might be a new product you're launching. Well, how can your SEO help that? You got to think a little bigger outside of just you. And then you always have to think, what is the actual outcome? So this really goes back to the business hurdle. So for you, the SEO might be like, I fixed all that metadata. I'm the ruler of metadata. I owned it. But
the Lord of the metadata.
Yes, the Lord of the metadata. But this may not be exactly what result your CEO, your client is looking for. It may be like, well, I fixed this thing so it drove more traffic and more people converted and bought this new product we were trying to sell. That is a much better ending to your story. Okay, so I promised I would talk about a time I really messed up storytelling in my career. So before I worked at Moz, I worked at a outdoor clothing company, and I worked on the e-commerce team, and we had this backlog of shirts. So for those of you who have never worked in fashion is very seasonal, and you often have different colors of clothing. So if you make the same shirt multiple seasons, you make it in different colors. And then eventually those older colors go on sale because, this season we're selling light blue, not dark blue, and those types of things. So I came up with this idea and I did all this research. I had my Google Trends report showing that these fly fishing shirts we made would be great holiday sales gifts. We'll advertise them in our newsletters. We'll put them on the homepage. We'll feature them. They're really popular in general with our audience. And, my trend report shows that fly fishing is going to come up during the holidays and people are going to buy these as gifts for their family members. these men's fly fishing shirts, and we're going to make all the money. And I was like, yeah. And I went to my meeting, and I sat around with my boss and essentially the CEO and some other people who were responsible for other types of sales throughout the company. And I said, I want to discount. I want to, use these already discounted shirts, and I want to sell them. And, my trend reports show that everything's going to be great, and we're going to make a bunch of money in e-commerce, and it's going to be the best thing ever. Where's my Christmas bonus? And the CEO turned to me and was like, no. I was like, what? Here's my data. He was like, no, we're going to go discount them and sell them wholesale. And then I went back to my cubicle and I cried. So the first thing that I got wrong in this story was I cast myself as the hero. I was like, I'm winning in e-commerce. I understand our customer. I'm doing all the work. So I'm the hero. I was not the hero. I was not the person who was on hook for selling these shirts. It was that CEO person. They were the ones responsible because we were actually owned by like other companies. So they were the one responsible for reporting in to other upper management. They were the ones that had to deliver the report and say, hey, we sold this inventory. We made this money. So casting myself as the hero didn't make that person feel very good about them. And in order to get my program through, I had to make them feel real good about themselves. So when the CEO looked at my story, it was all wrong because they were the hero. Okay, so let's look at it from their point of view. They're the hero. What are the things that are at the top of their climax? So this was during the height of the recession. We were having layoffs throughout the company. People were losing their jobs. And we sold really expensive clothing that were luxury items for luxury travel. And people were not buying it because of the recession. And it was a worry. It was on everyone's mind. We were like ready to like liquidate inventory because we were really worried we weren't going to get, the recession wasn't going to end and it was just going to keep going. So we also had this glut of extra inventory. And while this shirt was one of our best selling, probably still one of their best selling like products on their website, and most popular with their customer base, we still had all these colors, and we had probably over ordered because, when the recession starts, you don't necessarily always predict that. So you're like ordering for normal times, not recession times. And additionally, it was also the winter, and our brand was known for summer clothes. Not to mention that our recast hero, the CEO in this story, he was a fly fisherman himself. And he said, you don't go fly fishing in December in North America. This is 100% true. You typically don't. It's not the season. But he didn't actually think that people were buying that, these shirts as gifts for holidays. So he was not convinced. Luckily, I did have one thing right. We did want to make money. That was still really important. So when I went back to my cubicle, cried a little bit, and rethought this story, I figured out that there were better ways. There were good ways where I could show him that he was the hero. I could help him. I was that, I was the Sam to his Frodo. Handing him some lembas bread. Sorry, that was way too geeky, guys.
Moist to his Dr. Horrible.
And so I said, what can I do to show that this is actually impactful for our customers? How can I reframe this story? So I did some testing. So I mentioned that we had some discounted colors. So I was in charge of email newsletters, so I just did an email newsletter. And next time I went into that meeting, I was able to say, hey, I sent this email newsletter with these colors we already had discounted, and look at this money. Look at this money I can help you make. I can assist you. You're the hero of this story, but we can make this happen together. And, everyone looked at my numbers and looked at the money I had brought in, the actual cash, and they were on board with this program. And we worked through it, and, we sold shirts and made money and made everyone happy at the end of the day. So when you're considering your own stories and how you're building them, let's talk about some things you want to be really wary of, or kind of what I call them data rabbit holes. Especially those of us who, work in really data-driven environments, or we love digging into analytics. We can kind of get in some bad positions. So the first thing I really want to warn about is making sure that you don't give any misleading or shocking data just to prove your point. This can be really hard, especially if you're really passionate about your point. You just want to say something ridiculous. Don't do it. This chart is hilarious. It's it's a bad correlation that Jim Carrey causes autism. This is terrible. It's for the shock value, right? Don't go into your business transactions and do this just because you want to be a smartass that day. It can be really tempting, but don't do it. You always want to remember, as the great philosopher Mr. Spock said, humans make many illogical decisions. And a lot of it has to do with emotions and what they're feeling, or their own struggles, or, whether you ask them to come in they did this study that with nurses, if you ask them to come in for an interview on a rainy day, you were less likely to hire them because you were sad that it was rainy. So there's a ton of factors that can be going on that are outside your data-driven results, no matter how awesome they are. So try not to be shocking. The second thing I see a lot is people giving way too much data. They send a spreadsheet like this one. It's terrible. There's so many numbers. You don't know what to look at. Maybe you don't even really understand what it's about. What am I supposed to be digging into? What are the results? Very few times I've found do your clients or your bosses actually come to you and be like, give me the entire raw data file. No. So this data file is actually all the flight data from 2015. And this is something that the federal government puts out, and you can download all the data to find out how fast planes went from their origin to their destination, where they were flying, what airline it was, what days they were flying, yada, yada, yada. This is incomprehensible, but it can be useful. So what 538, those of us who love data, I'm sure we all go to their website and look at their things they do. They put together this interactive flight map. So they took this terrible spreadsheet and they made it into something beautiful. So you can look and see how long it actually takes you to get from point A to point B. So if I was booking a flight from Seattle to LAX, I could pull this up and I could see that the typical flight time is actually 2 hours and 41 minutes, no matter what the airline tells me it's going to be. And I can also always confirm there's a reason that I take Virgin, because they get me there on time and the fastest. And I like that. So as you can, not all of us are going to, of course, have opportunities like this to create a beautiful interactive web experience. But as you can see, this data is so much more clear. This is something you can actually give to customers. This is something you can give to bosses. This is not some daunting spreadsheet that is terrible. The third thing that often happens is we like to sometimes build fancy charts just to be fancy. So at Moz, we made this mistake. So we were really excited when we launched our new Moz Pro product, when we launched Moz Analytics. We, made the data that we were giving our customers so much nicer. And one of the things we really wanted to do is make it so much more insightful. But in one case, the prettiness got the best of us, and we created these donut charts that looked at the traffic to your site and broke them out like by like organic or paid or direct in a donut chart. These donut charts looked awesome in like screenshots. They looked good on the screen. However, our customers were like, yeah, we don't actually use those. They're completely useless. We would never put them on a report. And this is on the first page when we open up our campaign to dig into our data. I don't need this. And so we were sad, but we realized that we were just being fancy to be fancy. The fourth mistake is a lot of us will send out auto-generated reports. So I say this like I work for an analytics company that sends out auto-generated reports. Reports are awesome. Like we use our tools. They're great. But rarely do you want to send your auto-generated reports to your boss or your clients. Because usually the data that you want to highlight related to the specific work that you are doing isn't going to be on them. So we use Sprout Social here at Moz for all of our social media management, and this is their kind of automatic Twitter stats report. And the first thing you see is that it gives you the follower demographics of your breakdown, male versus female. Now, some of your campaigns this might be helpful for, but this is probably not what your boss wants to see. It's certainly not something we track. And it's like right up in front. Okay, no. So I would never like set this to auto send to my boss to give her my update on how we're doing on Twitter. No, she doesn't want to see this. So be really wary if you're sending out auto-generated reports, especially if they're coming directly from the tools. Make sure that you're crafting them for your audience. Okay, so we got the 4 don'ts. What about the 4 do's? So we really want to keep refining our message, keep refining our storytelling. So the first one is you really want to understand the emotional and business goals. So we talked quite a bit about this when I was talking about my mistake. But how can we do that in a good way? So every year at Moz, after MozCon, we sell MozCon videos. And for many, many years, it took us a long time to get them out, like 4 months after the conference, which is just really egregious and terrible. And no one's excited about it anymore. People are starting to think that the information at the conference is old. I really hope it's not after 4 months. It's not how we program it, but we're selling these videos. People gotta believe that they are up to date. And the reason I had a really hard time like getting this project through was getting really stuck with our dev team. They were like, oh, sure, yeah, we had fun at MozCon. We drank a lot. We talked to a lot of people. But I don't really want to work on this project. It's boring. So I tried something different. I went into my meeting to talk to them about this project and what they had to do on it. And I said, so we have a goal. We want to have 100K in sales. We want to make this much money. They got really, really excited about that. For whatever reason, that particular team, they love knowing what our sales goals are, and they love hearing how we're doing on them, and they love being able to contribute to them. And I showed them, based on when we had released the videos in the past, how much more money we made the closer we started selling those videos to the actual end of the event. And they got really excited. And you know what? This past MozCon, we got those videos out in a month, and we made this goal. Woo! So the second thing that you always want to do is make sure you curate your data in its results. So I think this article, this content marketing from Powell's is great. It's the 25 women authors to read before you die. There's a lot of amazing women authors out there. Certainly more than 25, but someone from Powell said, let's pull like the best ones and then we'll go through and then we're going to pull the really important ones. Or, we want to make sure that our list is varied. We want to make sure, we have different types of books. We want to make sure we have, different women from different backgrounds and demographics. We're going to really curate this. So Thomas Carlyle said that a person who is gifted sees the essential point and leaves the rest as surplus. as someone who digs into data, you're going to see a lot of things. So you need to pull out the important things for your project, for your business, for what you're trying to sell. And sometimes you leave some of it behind. So one of the things that I really dive into is the feedback post MozCon. And, the conference is 1,500 people. We have usually around 40%, though I'd love more people, to take the post-conference survey. And we have a lot of write-in fields because we really want to hear what people are thinking and what people want to make our show better. And in the write-in fields, especially, I get a lot of one-offs. Like, usually we know kind of the big things, like if Wi-Fi doesn't work, like we all realize Wi-Fi doesn't work. So you don't really need to tell me 5,000 times that the Wi-Fi doesn't work. But people do sometimes surface unique requests. And it's a show. We have a budget. We can only do so many upgrades to the show each year. So not every person's request is either valid or we can actually do. So we had 2 requests that came out of the feedback from last year that I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is not just something I'm going to be like, all right, this is something we're never going to do, or like this doesn't make sense for our business goals or whatever. So one person said, I love watching the MozCon videos, but you guys don't record in HD, and I really want to go home and I want to watch them on like my 70-inch HD TV. It's going to be great. Can you make HD videos next year? Then another person said, I'm getting older and you have some younger speakers in particular who talk really fast. And I would love live closed captioning on the big screens as the person's talking. It would make my experience a lot better. And so when I got both these pieces of feedback, I weighed them against each other and I said, all right, so in order to upgrade our cameras to record HD, it's about $5,000 more. And in order to get live closed captioning, to hire someone to do this and make sure it's all set up, it's also about $5,000 more in order to make this happen. And then I looked at the impact. And captions, those are more impactful for the audience. It will make our conference more successful and more accessible for people of, whether it's old people who, I put myself in this. I have really, really terrible, eyesight and listening skills sometimes when I'm at conferences, especially all day. So I put myself in this bucket, just saying. Well, there's those of us who can use a little captioning to help us learn, or just make more accessible for people with hearing difficulties, whatever. And I said, all right, this captions makes MozCon more tech-y, and it makes our mission to make MozCon more inclusive better. So if we're going to upgrade something and we're going to spend the extra $5,000 and I'm going to put it in the budget and I'm going to go talk to the finance people, it's going to be captions. And I really hope if we get our act together and all our ducks in a row that we're going to have live closed captioning at MozCon.
It's going to be rad. Super excited.
Me too. So the third thing you always want to remember is to use the appropriate medium for your data's message. So this is a chart of the top 5 most played 90s hits on Spotify. So the top one is, unsurprisingly, Smells Like Teen Spirit. But if you look at the actual numbers, Smells Like Teen Spirit has over 50 million plays on Spotify. I'm sure it's more now. And number 2 is Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls, which has 35 million hits. Now that's a lot too, but 50 million is a lot more than 35 million. And like I said earlier, we humans, we have problems with these numbers once they get out of that 5 range, really once they get out of that 100 range. So, thinking about 35 million compared to 50 million is really hard. So this website broke them out, and they took, I love this chart because it actually shows kind of the distance, right? So here's a little Kurt Cobain head talking about, I mean, that's the most popular song. There Smells Like Teen Spirit. Look how far it is away from even those 35 million. This chart really shows, at least in these heavy hitters, how far, like what the actual distance is. And it helps us understand that number in a chart. So, you might not have as cool charts as this, but think about how your charting shows the actual numbers and can help people understand just how, much more 50 million is compared to 35 million. The fourth suggestion I have on your do's is to be okay when progress appears illogical in your data-driven results. So for a long time, the Moz blog was not mobile responsive. If you go to the rest of our website, it's not mobile friendly at all. And we got a lot of customers constantly complaining. We probably had like 10 people every week being like, Moz, I went to your blog. Do you know it's not mobily optimized? And we're like, yes, we know. And then our souls died a little bit every time.
We do know, by the way. We know. We know.
See, Matt's on social media sometimes too, so he knows. He knows. So we did this big launch right before Google's mobile update last April went through, and we launched the blog mobilely responsive. It was awesome. We were so excited internally. We finally got to not have to listen to as many people complaining that our site wasn't mobile friendly. I mean, validly complaining, but still. But then when we actually looked at the data, so Rand made this post on his blog about how our traffic didn't change. We actually saw a slight dip in mobile traffic when we made the blog mobile friendly. Oh, what? This data is showing me that it didn't really matter that we made our blog mobile friendly. But that doesn't matter. Like, whatever. This doesn't matter. You're like, what? It's data. Why doesn't it matter? You shouldn't have spent all these resources and all this time and all these teams that had to work on this project, because it wasn't just, a couple marketers doing this. It was devs and design and a lot of people and a lot of energy and a lot of people selling things to various people. It's a complicated project. Anyway, but the thing is it was progress on our website. We know that more people than ever use their mobile phones. We know that Google in their algo is valuing mobile results more. It's progress. It's where the industry is going. It's where the industry, you might argue, is already there. And it actually makes a better experience overall for our users, even if this chart isn't showing that we have more mobile visitors than we did before. All right, so let's revisit my story with my dad and what I did wrong, particularly when I was a kid and I didn't really understand storytelling as well. And I, just cried about some polar bears. I still cry about polar bears, let's be honest. So let's apply what I didn't know then to talk to my father about global warming and not getting this Yosemite Sam Bugs Bunny like fisticuffs, yelling at each other, accusing each other of things. I often get called a tree hugger. So the thing I didn't really understand about my father at the time, so my father's an auto mechanic. I mentioned this. But I didn't understand as a child what this really meant. So my father was really worried that global warming is real, which it is, that he was going to lose his job. He thought that people, the EPA or environmentalists, were going to come in and tell him that automobiles were terrible. They were one of the leading sources of pollution. We were not going to have cars anymore. And he would be out of a job. As a kid, I didn't really understand, as most of us don't understand, what having a job was all about. I didn't understand what providing for your family was, or having a mortgage you had to pay, or, maybe thinking about how your 3 kids might go to college someday. Maybe. I don't know. All these things. I didn't think about them because I was a kid and I was just like, oh, sure, let's watch some cartoons. So my dad had all these anxieties that were really deeply emotionally tied up with global warming and environmentalism. and he thought that this was going to destroy his livelihood. So how would I address this with my dad today? So I thought this was pretty cheeky, some cheeky marketing. Um, these mechanics in California wanted to, be like, yeah, we're aware that global warming is a thing and it's getting hotter on our planet, so we're gonna wear kilts when we work on cars. And it did some marketing PR news around it, and they got some traction. And I'm sure many of their customers were just like happy to see that at least an auto mechanic shop was acknowledging that global warming is a thing. I could have also talked to my father about his hobbies and what he's seen. So remember how, he really looked to that bread as his empirical evidence because it was the thing he could see that the earth wasn't being poisoned by these chemicals because we didn't die. Well, my father has for many years been an avid winter sports person. He used to ski all the time. Like back in the 70s, he was always on the mountain, and nowadays he snowmobiles. And I bet, so this is actually a picture of my brother and my dad out there snowmobiling, and I bet my dad has noticed that the snowmobiling season is a little shorter than he remembers. Maybe that snowpack is a little less. I mean, especially last year. Last year, the snowpack in the Pacific Northwest was down so much. And it affected everyone who loves to get out there and do winter sports in the snow. This is something he can see. This is very, very empirical evidence to him. It's very hands-on. Instead of just showing him this like chart over here that shows snowpack and how it's going down, like that's not impactful for him. But asking him like, hey, are you going out snowmobiling yet? Oh, wait, it's not open because there's not enough snow yet. And then we could have a conversation of what, it used to be like. And maybe this global warming thing is a thing. I could also address his fears about his livelihood going away. So my dad lives in Oregon, and the Oregonian put out an article recently that Portland highways are at or above capacity and they're getting even fuller. People aren't, putting their car away because they're worried about global warming. People are still, especially in Oregon, still driving their cars everywhere. Even if a lot more people are using mass transit, cars are still a really popular mode of transit that people still need. We can also talk about self-driving cars. And, if we all get our own self-driving cars or however that may work, the self-driving cars are going to need people to fix them. He could get, a contract with Google or for like that, his region, like they're going to need local mechanics to fix them. So there's lots of things that I could have talked to my father about. So what I really want all of you to take away today is that I want you to go out there and build your customized stories with data. I want you to think about the people that you're talking to these projects about, the people that you're making these proposals to, and I want you to really make them personal for that individual so you can get your work done. Don't just let your data sit there and stand alone and kind of like, oh, well, I did it. That's only part of it. You got to tell the story and you got to sell it. Thank you so much.
All right, yeah. Thank you, Erica. That was awesome. And again, I'm here with Erica McGillivray. She is the Senior Community Manager at Moz. I hope I didn't distract you too much. I'm not used to having the presenter in the room. So every time, Erica's a very professional presenter, so she makes eye contact with her audience. And whenever she made eye contact with me, I just kind of giggled. It was just because there's only two of us in the room. It's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, I hope everybody was able to pay attention. I'm sure I'll hear about it in the post-webinar survey. So as a reminder, we are recording this, and we're going to put the recording and deck up on our site at moz.com/webinars within 24 to 48 hours. And if you don't feel like you can remember to check back on the website, we also will be sending out an email as soon as those are online so that you will get notified that the video is available for you to download and check out. You'll need to register for a free community account with Moz in order to watch past webinars. Don't worry, we don't spam you or anything. Feel free to sign up and enjoy the community. If you've got any questions or concerns about the Moz in our series in general, please contact us at community@moz.com. Very good chance one of the two of us will be the ones getting back to you. And with that, we will move on to Q&A. Now, I don't have too many questions yet, so keep in mind this is going to run until noon or until we're out of questions. So get those into me. You can do that through the GoToWebinar interface or via Twitter using the hashtag Mozinar. That's hashtag MOZINAR. So to start with the really hard-hitting questions, early in your deck, were those Lord of the Rings leggings?
Yes. Those are Lord of the Rings leggings from Black Milk.
Awesome.
And it's the map.
I didn't know for sure, but I kind of figured. So now that that's out of the way, our next question comes from Samuel, who works for a big data company that generates terabytes of new data every day on themselves and their customers. What do you think is the best way to dig through such large volumes of data to find the good stories to tell about them and their customers?
So I would really look at your larger business goals and talk with your bosses, your higher ups, and figure out what they are really aiming for, whether you're selling something specific or if you're doing a certain content campaign or if you're trying to put together a new program and what you're trying to prove. So that's a ton of data. At Moz, we also have some data sources like that are crazy large. We actually have a whole data science team here that they come up with these like crazy, amazing things that I like. I do not have a degree, a high mathematics degree. I have a degree in creative writing. So they kind of blow my mind every time they talk about what they do. We also have like an analytics team that's like brings it even closer when we're looking at projects. So for instance, one thing that we dug through at Moz was looking at our customer loyalty and how they kind of stayed with us through. Most people, at least who are on our pro product, they do a 30-day free trial, and after that 30 days you get charged monthly. And we said, okay, how loyal are these customers? Like, how do they stay with us, and who are the most loyal customers, and how can we make other customers who are less loyal more loyal? And one thing that we discovered, which really validates on my own job and Matt's job, is that customers who are in our community and interacting with us, whether you're on a webinar like this, or if you're in our Q&A forum, or you're commenting on our blog, they actually have a way higher retention and longevity. I think it was something like they were 6 times more likely to stay with Moz long term than customers who didn't have those same interactions. So we were able to break it down and be like, okay, we want to focus on customer loyalty. So what data are we looking at and what are we digging into?
Awesome. Thank you. Now, I've had a few folks write in with questions about visualization tools, either web-based online visualization tools or standalone visualization tools. Hugo has heard good things about Tableau. What do you think of Tableau, and are there any other visualization tools that you would just get behind and recommend for the folks at home or at work? Let's be real. They're probably at work.
Yeah, probably at work. So I haven't used Tableau a whole bunch. I have seen some great visualizations out of it. It's actually something we're going to start using at Moz. When you are thinking about visualizations, I always try to keep it as simple as possible. Like sometimes creating a really simple chart in Excel can be much better than really trying to create something crazy. And you really just have to work with kind of your own limitations, whether it's budgeting or not. I think there was a really good post a while ago on tools to visualize. It was by Miranda, who used to work at Moz.
Yeah. I'm gonna look for.
Yeah, Matt will share it out to everyone.
Totally will.
She has some really great, it's particularly free tools. It's called 10 Tools for Creating, Infographics and Visualizations. One tool we also use at Moz, so I use a lot of Google spreadsheets because I'm a little addicted to be able to sharing things really quickly with people. and really simply. But we use a tool called PictoChart, and we send out a community, we call it the Community Chronicle, where we report all of our community metrics, and it makes some really simple, really easy charts for people to understand. I think that's really, when it comes to visualizations, that's the thing you really want to focus on, is not so much what's the tool I'm using, but does this tool actually explain the story I'm telling? Can a person look at this chart and figure out what this data says without me holding their hand and walking them through the different axes and what the different kind of ups and downs of the chart mean?
Awesome. So I kind of love this question, and I am so sorry, my friend. I'm going to completely destroy your name. I want to say Yorica or Yorick. But regardless, he's wondering, he or she actually, I'm not sure. You know your dad and you know your boss. But in content marketing, you're not always going to know your audience that well. And you can't be too broad in your approach. If you try to reach everybody, you won't reach anybody. So how do you choose your approach on your to your story without knowing the emotions your audience has?
So this is where audience research really comes in, and things like building audience personas and working with the data that you do have. It really depends how much time you have to dig in to who your audience is, to how far you can kind of go down this rabbit hole of figuring out what they might like. So an easy thing to always look at is any data that your company has or your clientele has about who they think is their customer and who they think is buying these things. Don't get specific. Ask them questions demographically, ask them questions about what's been successful, and see what you can pull out of that. You can also then kind of take it one step bigger. So I talked a little bit about when I worked at the outdoor clothing company that I did a lot of research using Google Trends. You can use tools like Google Trends. BuzzSumo has some great content tools. Moz Content as well has some great things that you can really dig in, and you can figure out who these people are. Maybe you build some really specific personas depending on what you're doing. Don't be afraid to even create a Facebook social ad. Maybe you don't even use the social ad, but maybe you just use it from some data mining on demographics, or maybe use it for some testing. I used to volunteer at a nonprofit called Geek Girl Con, and we wanted to let people know that we were having this convention, and it was our first year, and we didn't know how many people were going to show up, and we were trying to reach an audience around Seattle, and we built some targeted Facebook ads to test who we thought our audience was. And we literally sat down and we said, okay, we think our audience is going to be this type of person. So we built a persona around someone who was a librarian, who likes certain things, who was in a certain age demographic. Then we built one around a woman who was a scientist. And we kind of went from there, and we just kind of played with obviously we saw a lot of these people in ourselves, and that's where we started because we were our own customers. But what are kind of the basics? So we were able to put these ads out, and all we wanted was likes on our Facebook page because we were just trying to get people to know that we were an organization. But doing things like this can make a great test to see are people interested in this content? Am I hitting kind of that right demographic? And if you really want to you can get really crazy complicated. There's definitely lots of different people talking about personas. Mike King does a great job at talking about them. If you really want to dive into what's he call it, psychographics, with Marty Weintraub, that man will blow your mind.
Blow your mind anyway.
He's amazing. If you really want to dive in and look at affinity markets, so he does lots of things where he's I bet you thought your audience was stodgy, but I found that they were all Game of Thrones fans. Here's some really cool content you could do with this audience. And so it's really up to you, and I should say it's up to you, but it's also up to your resources that you have at your disposal for how much you're going to dive in. And I would also, don't be afraid to try new things. Obviously, you're not going to be able to spend like the biggest budget to create the most crazy thing out there. But you can, spend a little time digging in, talking with people, trying to figure out who they are, and go from there.
Awesome. Thank you. Leah, I love this question. Does it ever bother you to have to be Sam to get the job done instead of Frodo?
Oh, all the time, especially when I was in my career at that story that I told. I was really angry that I was not the hero, especially because the wholesale salespeople got bonuses based on their sales, and I was not getting bonuses based on my e-commerce sales. So, yeah, it can be really hard to get over your own ego and how you look at something. But if you want to get your projects done, sometimes you have to suck it up and be like, all right, I'm going to cast this person as the hero because this is the only way I'm getting this done.
Fair. So I just want to add, for everybody who is interested in visualization tools, Tracy on Twitter has recommended Canva, Canva, as well. She says it's got an easy web UI, good drag and drop, good community. I am not familiar with it, but thanks for that. Much appreciated.
I've used it. It's good.
It's good. Awesome. Leah would rather be Captain Picard. I would agree.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. I'm a Cisco man myself, but that's just because I'm a DS9 fan.
Well, since we were talking about my dad, I always wanted Captain Picard to be my father.
Yeah.
Because he would believe in global warming.
Oh, absolutely he would.
He'd be like, Data, yes, please tell me more.
Andrew, that is Canva, Canva, like a singular canvas. I don't know. Anyway, so Amanda asks, do you see a difference between crafting database stories for internal versus external audiences? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Great questions, everyone. Yeah. Keep sending them. We have like 33 minutes left if you want to get them in.
Oh, Matt's doing the countdown. He must be getting something really good for lunch.
I actually am. Yeah, totally. Yeah, anyway, continue.
Anyway, what were we talking about again? We were talking about internal, external. Yes. Yeah, so I mean, internal stories, you can get really specific. Usually your audience is much smaller. Like I mentioned, when I'm pitching something to my boss and I'm like, this will help build our community. She's like, all right, I don't need to see the numbers on that. You've sold me. I believe in community. I don't have to sell her on that aspect. But when you are looking at presenting your data to a broader audience, you do have to consider, who the audience is. We talked a little bit about this. And you got to think about their demographics or who might just stumble upon that and who may not have the same frame of reference that you do. They may not have the same information. They may not have the same core values as you. So my coworker, Jackie McGuire, did a blog post on the Moz blog based on our industry survey data, and it talked specifically about the wage gap in our industry between men and women. And she, broke out the numbers. Like to me it's a very straightforward argument. I'm also, anyone who follows me on Twitter knows that I'm an ardent feminist.
You?
Me?
Never.
What?
Not one time.
And, in my knowledge base, there's, online marketing is no different than many other industries that struggle with wage-based pay gap, gender-based pay gap, and other such sexist business practices. But when Jackie wrote this post, I mean, she did a great job. Her post is good. But
she's brilliant.
She's amazing. But what she didn't necessarily factor in was people who are coming in who did not have that sort of background. Internally, we talk about a lot of things at Moz about how, we can make sure that we don't have gender-based pay gaps, how we can make sure that we don't have other types of like systemic discrimination within Moz itself, and we have our tag fee code, and that really helps us navigate those conversations and makes them less arduous. But when you invite the general public into your conversation, people have different frames of references. People believe different things. People have different emotional cords you don't even know about. And there was a lot of people who hopped in the comments, and I hopped in the comments to help Jackie out because she kind of came up to me and she's like, oh God, I didn't really expect this response. Can I have some help? Which is like, that's what teams are for, right? And there were a lot of people that were just like, oh, I don't believe this is true, or like, this is not a thing. And it's like, well, the data's there. But they didn't have this same frame of reference, where the rest of us, internally at Moz, we're tag-free, we talk about these problems in a different way. We have a different culture here than the general kind of public.
We sure do. All right, let's see. Now, Mitt asks, what are the best ways to tell stories with data, like aside from infographic? Like, what are some other good ways to tell these stories?
Oh, I think if you can show the data in different ways. So one great thing I love when selling to people is video, especially when I worked in e-commerce. Oh my God, video is like the holy grail of the things I never actually got to do. So I mentioned I used to sell outdoor clothing. For those of you who've never bought outdoor clothing or have never stepped foot in an REI, I wasn't working for REI. I should also say that. You'll know that it becomes, outdoor clothing can get really technical, and there's all these like crazy things that they tell you that it can do. There's a difference between something that's water resistant and waterproof. There's, differences in tread on your shoes. There's differences in, how moisture wicking something is or how fast it can dry. So what you can use video to like show these things. So if you say that, your pants are waterproof, show it. Show a video of that. That, like, how crazy amazing is that? Or if you can wash this underwear in a sink, something else we also sold, and it would like dry overnight while you were sleeping, and you'd have, your fresh pair of underwear, show that. One of the most successful campaigns I did with some bloggers was I sent them underwear, and I said, hey bloggers, you guys travel around, this is great. I'm going to send you some underwear. We'd love if you did a review of it. You don't have to, because, that's the FCC rules, by the way. And we had 2 bloggers actually who created videos, and one of them, oh man, it was a really compelling, funny video. He showed himself washing his underwear in a sink, and it really it wasn't like, oh, this dries in this many hours, and this fabric is moisture wicking and quick drying. Those were all, facts and stats, and we could tell customers that. But when they really saw someone washing it in a sink, and they saw how the water ran off the fabric after it was done, it made such more impact. Not to mention, it was also funny because he was not wearing his underwear when he was washing them, because he only had one pair of underwear.
Oh, that is funny. Let's see. Now, actually, as a follow-up to that, Mitt also asks, don't you think sometimes fancy tables are useful to attract customers or attract eyes?
It depends if your fancy table actually can attract eyes in the right direction. I'm trying to think. Obviously, at Moz, we make data analytics tools. We produce lots of fancy charts. And one of the things that we always look at is, our customers, like, one, getting the data they want and they need, but also, does this chart make sense? So you can present a chart in a way that has lots of numbers or is really fancy that can be compelling. I was just thinking of, I was looking last night at a post by our manager of audience development, Trevor Klein, who we did a HubSpot and us did a study on our blog where we decided we would only, so we usually post a blog post on our blog every single day of the week. And we tried it. What if we only posted every other day? And then we tried it. What if we posted 2 posts every day? And, Trevor and HubSpot did this as well. And we looked and compared like traffic, like was our traffic up? Was it down? Did we get more page views? Did people stay longer on the page? Did people read these posts more or less than they normally did? And Trevor created a lot of great charts for that. And a lot of them were like pretty complicated data for our audience, and it went over really well. But again, it was very clear what people were supposed to be looking at. He also provided that explanation for them to maybe help them through what the experiment was about and what they were exactly looking at, or where he got the data from.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of ways to present data, I just want to note for everyone that Andrew through GoToWebinar has jumped in and said that they're focusing on HTML infographics, essentially taking important stats from a research document, highlighting them in an HTML infographic page, and then leading people to download the full report. In his opinion, those kind of infographics don't get enough love, especially with their ability to be mobile friendly and interactive. So just an idea for you. Thank you, Andrew. We definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, that flight chart that I showed was kind of similar in that. I mean, it was very, very much on the fancy end of HTML.
So fancy.
Interactive.
So fancy. Yes. So I've only got about 2 more questions. So folks, keep in mind, if you wanna get more in, or you just want to spend more time with our charming selves, please send in any questions that come to mind through GoToWebinar or through #Mozinar on Twitter. I don't know what the answer to this would be, but I kind of love the phrasing of it. This is from Hugo through GoToWebinar. If we have a hero in our story, do we need a villain?
You certainly could have a villain. I would always caution you to on casting that villain. So I had a real problem when I had to recast that hero in my story before, because I didn't necessarily like the person who had to be the hero in that story. And probably in my original story, he might have been a little bit of my villain.
Think of him as an anti-hero. It's very big right now.
An anti-hero, yes. So yeah, I would just caution you on who you're casting as a villain. Maybe the villain is a thing that's happening. Maybe it's a trend in your industry you don't like. Maybe it's a recession. Maybe it's extra inventory. Maybe it's a season. Maybe it's a blizzard that's causing people not to go anywhere, or power outages. I would just be really cautious. I would use the Gene Roddenberry storytelling method.
Oh yeah.
So for those of you who aren't huge Star Trek geeks like me,
it's not super likely you're a huge Star Trek geek quite like Erica. It's a possibility, but anyway, sorry, continue.
So in the original Star Trek series and in the Next Generation, up until Gene Roddenberry's death, he had a rule that all conflict, all villains, had to come from outside of the crew. So, Kirk and Spock could have a disagreement, but they could, Spock could never be the villain, or Kirk could never be the villain. It always had to be someone who wasn't part of the crew, who wasn't part of the team.
Mirror Universe Spock.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So you never want to cast someone internally as the villain, even if you are having a hard time getting your projects through. Like when I talked about the devs that I was having a really hard time working with, getting them excited about those MozCon videos. It would have been easy to go to my boss and be like, they're the villains, they won't code my page for me. But you know what? I have to
Jen
work.
would have done it herself. That's what she usually does.
I have to, Matt and I, we have to work with those devs every single day. We have to work with them on a lot of projects. So it's really important that we don't isolate them and we don't cast them as the villain in our story. Instead, they may be a roadblock. Mm-hmm. They may be something we need to work through, go around. They may be a trying time. We may pull out some hair. But they're, at the end of the day, people that we work with and people we have to respect. So if you are casting a villain, make sure that that villain is coming from outside your crew. Don't pick on anyone internally, and also don't make your customers a villain, because that's just tacky.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely want your customers to stay on the side of good. So this is the last actual question I have. This one comes from Mark. I'm not sure if we have any data on this, but have you noticed any differences in the type of data stories that are more effective internationally, like US versus Europe or Southeast Asia?
So I haven't done a lot of digging into this, besides really colloquial differences, make sure you're not getting super slangy and using different terminology. My partner is British, so we often say things that confuse each other. It's real fun. But we work through it. But she's less likely to get offended at something I say versus someone you may not know. I do recommend, particularly if you are building content for Southeast Asia. We actually had a great Mozinar from some of the guys from Built Visible, who last year, I think it was last April, came on, and they talked about content projects and how to really build them for a Southeast Asia audience.
Oh, that's true. I'm gonna try.
So I would
tweet that.
Yeah, I would. If you're in that market, I highly suggest that. And kind of digging in. Unfortunately, I don't have any other data. The other thing I could also recommend is Natalie Nahai's MozCon talk, which I actually think is on YouTube now.
Is it?
Okay. Her initial one that
spell her last name?
It's N-A-H, I don't know.
That's it, N-A-H-A-I.
Yes, her MozCon 2013 talk, which is online, which is called Gender and Cultural Web Psychology, How Gender and Cultural Web Psychologies Affect Customer Experience. And she does a great job in this talk at breaking down cultural differences and how different cultures kind of see themselves. So I think that could be really helpful. She also has written at least one book where she talks a lot about these topics. So I would recommend checking those out. And
it's coming.
Matt is quickly typing and tweeting. It's the best.
Oh, I did it wrong. That's coming too. I'll find that Built Visible one, and I'll tweet this out in a minute, because I am supposed to be doing something right now.
He's supposed to be looking at your questions.
I am, but there aren't any more.
Oh.
That's it. That's all the questions.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and your really great questions. I loved it.
And actually, this is not a question, but this comes from Hugo, who's been involved in the conversation a bit today, and he sent us a quote from Maya Angelou, which is, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel."
Oh, I love Maya Angelou.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful signing off thought for you in the wake of this lovely Mozinar. Thank you so much, Erica, once again. So one more time, this webinar and deck will both be available within the next 24 hours or so at moz.com/webinars. And you'll all receive a link in a follow-up email in the next day or two. You can sign up for a free Moz community account. You'll need to do that in order to watch past webinars. Please join us on Tuesday, February 23rd for our next webinar with Talia Wolf. She's the CEO of Conversioner. Very exciting. She'll be presenting the psychology of mobile visitors and how to convert them. So if you're interested in attracting mobile visitors and actually getting them to do what you want on your site.
I'm really excited for this one. She's supposed to be like a super CRO genius.
Yeah,
she's also from Israel.
Yeah, she is. So she's one of our international Mozinar presenters. Sign on just to show some appreciation for what time it must be for her at 10:30 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. Now, finally, if you have any questions or concerns about Mozinars in general, please contact us at community@moz.com. And yes, you are literally contacting us at community@moz.com. And everyone have a wonderful week. It has been our pleasure, and hope to see you next time.
Bye.